It's an interesting question. How do you meditate on love and compassion? In what sense is it something you can meditate on? In some ways it seems more obvious how you would integrate love and compassion in your life, because you have people around and people that you can be kind to and loving towards. But how do you practice love and compassion as meditation? We're used to the idea that meditation is actually the word gom that is usually used for meditation means to accustom yourself. So our main practice is the formless practice of what's the word I just said? I guess it accustoming ourselves to resting in spaciousness and allowing what comes up to dissolve into the spaciousness with the out breath, in a sense of wake, heart, open, be. So where does love and compassion come into that in a way? How do you meditate on that? Because we just become very simple, nothing to remove, nothing to add, just by seeing the truth of being as it is, by seeing the truth that is liberation. It's all very simple, very formless, minimum of intellectual effort or conceptual effort. That's kind of from the word go, that's how we are introduced to meditation. Very simple, letting go, opening. And now this meditating on love and compassion sounds like a job to do, doesn't it? What are you going to do? How do you meditate on it? But it's the same idea of accustoming yourself to the love and compassion that we have naturally in us. So we've probably experienced love and compassion just naturally in our life, one way or another, even if on quite a minimal level, or maybe there's quite a strong driving force in your life. So what are we doing when we're actually meditating on it? Or even trying to develop it or intensify it or increase it? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to get a certain feeling? I think sometimes you think, oh yes, love and compassion feels like that. I have to somehow crank up some love and compassion that feels like that. And it's very dubious, isn't it? You sort of think, well, if I really felt love and compassion, I'd be out there acting and doing things for people. I wouldn't just be sitting here doing nothing, seemingly. But customizing ourselves is actually a matter of remembering, recognizing and remembering. So the word, we use this word mindfulness in English, which could mean just simply remembering, bringing to mind, returning our attention to something. And it can also mean, certainly when you have the word smriti or drimba, the word smriti in Sanskrit has also got that meaning of discernment, being able to balance things, to kind of know when you've hit the right spot, when you've got the right touch. That's the quality of smriti or drimba. I think the meaning of that has got a bit lost in the Tibetan, because drimba just means to recollect. But the smriti definitely has this sense of remembering what it is that's really important, which is getting the right touch, the right balance, being able to distinguish between what's not it and what is it, what is Dharma, what isn't Dharma. So it's a faculty we have. Just a simple faculty, like when we know the center of balance, or we know how to judge speed, or we know how to gauge heights. We can do it. We can get the right touch, and we know how hard or how light to press when we're doing a job. We just have a natural feel for it, don't we? And we bring our attention to bear, and we can get the right. We can sort of get it. We don't know quite how we get it, but we know when we haven't got it. So we know when that wasn't skillful, when that was clumsy, when that didn't work, and then we know, oh yeah, I needed to be a bit more. If I want to sit straight, then I have to be a bit more like this. So that quality is what we're using in the meditation and in our daily life. So what we need to do is to set it up in the direction we want to go. So we know we're going wake heart, we're going to align with our hearts. When it's not really, and our heart feels a bit kind of crushed or hardened or lifeless, then that we sense that. So that would be the meditation would be to sense that, notice that, and find. I use this expression, skill, beauty, and play. You sort of play around and think, oh, that was better. How did that happen? Oh yeah, that was that. That felt better. I can do that now because I've noticed enough and noticed the difference and noticed how to create that difference. But it's not that I'm doing it, it's just I've got a sense of it. Oops, no, I went too far with that one. It's become counterproductive. So that's what we're doing when we're developing love and compassion. I say developing, when we're connecting to our natural love and compassion through meditation. So you need to start with some formless practice of being in touch with your whole being, really, especially your heart. Not that you focus on the heart, but you just notice if you're right up here in your head, or you're sort of, like in some sort of tension. You kind of notice, oh, yes, I'm reorientating or realigning with my heart somehow, and we just can do it. If we think about it, we can't. If we don't think about it, if we just let ourselves connect somehow. And connecting doesn't mean I feel good. It just means I notice I'm not feeling good because I've connected to, oh yeah, it's one of those days. And then that sense that there could be more space. If you're feeling kind of a bit oppressed, the opening is just to notice it could be less oppressed, it could open. And if you're feeling very open, you could really look even more closely at how open. You can look at, it's so open, actually there's nothing there. It's just emptiness. It's just It's completely open, and resting in that. And then the question arises, now what? So it's the same with when we're practicing the love and compassion, we start off with some sort of spaciousness and good-heartedness, and now what? Now what? I'm supposed to be doing something. And it's good at that point to remember that although as practitioners we do sort of have to do something, the irony is in order to not do anything. So that just be is just a teaser in a way. Because if you try to be and not do anything, you're actually trying not to do anything, which doesn't have that simplicity of being. But it's good to keep that irony alive, that sense of irony alive, that you're an earnest practitioner, a desperately earnest practitioner, because you realize how serious the problem of suffering is, and how difficult the path is, and how long it is, and how dedicated you have to be. But at the same time, there's that lightness of, because actually it's simple. There isn't this big thing that I've got to achieve. It's like, it's simple and I'm nowhere near there. It's a different sort of feel to it, isn't there? I'm nowhere near so simple, but it is about simplicity. That kind of feels right. So now, how are we going to meditate on love and compassion? It is awake, it is heart, it is open, it is just simply being. So it's all there. But what's actually going on now? That's where we have to start, isn't it? What's actually going on? So that's where we have to start. And then if we're going to kind of use words, which is usually a good way to start, because then you've got somewhere to start. May all beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. And that's, as soon as you say it, at least as soon as I say it, I think, yes, of course. Yes. It's all about happiness. It isn't about being very clever and understanding some deep philosophical thing, or, being very good at this, or very good, meditator, or very, moral person. It's actually about happiness. One only wants to be a moral person because that's about happiness. One only wants to meditate because that's about happiness. One only wants to practice Dharma because it's about happiness for myself and all beings. So that's a kind of good place to start. I don't know how many of you have already looked at the Awakened Heart Sangha booklet on the Apramanas, but there's some good tips in here about how you might meditate on love and compassion. And in there it sort of starts with, well, having started where you are, you then kind of use your present state of mind as a trigger or as a reminder or a way of thinking your way out of it. So if you're feeling disconnected from a feeling of happiness, well, maybe focus on happiness and think about when you have felt happy, or how you imagine happiness might be, and even noticing things like what made you laugh recently? What was that? What was that laugh? What made you smile? What was that? So you're actually reflecting, you're actually thinking. And of course, what happens when you allow yourself to think is you find you've drifted off. One thing has led to another, and so you have to keep bringing yourself back to the point, which is, happiness and what I know of happiness. And of course, the heart wish. What is it? Do I wish for happiness? Do I wish for myself and all beings to be happy? So there is reflection going on. You're asking yourself questions. You're giving yourself pokes and you're noticing. The main thing is that you're noticing what's actually going on. Whether it's resistance, whether you're enjoying it, whether it's opening up into spacious, happy place, or whether it's like really hard work, like walking through treacle. But every now and then there's a little bit of something that might be it. That might be what it's about. Whatever is happening, that's it. That's the meditation. And it's important to spend time appreciating the positive moments, not just noticing what needs to be dealt with, what needs to be let go of, what needs to be transformed, but also noticing what's fine, what's okay, what's actually all right. Yeah. If you're in a lot of pain in your body and that's really dominating your awareness, is there anything that's all right? Is there also something that's all right? Kind of noticing that, appreciating that. And then noticing how your mind tends to the one or tends to the other, how the mind gets small and closed in on itself, or it can actually let go and really open up and become spacious. Maybe you suddenly hear a bird calling and it reminds you of the space outside, and that kind of makes you aware of, oh, that was a relief from where I was, all stuck in my thoughts and prison feeling of limitedness. So really becoming aware of not just what's there habitually, but what's there that's breaking through all the time. And allow yourself to really want that. Want that happiness. I want more of it. I want everyone to have more of it. I want it to be a happiness that doesn't come and go. I want it a happiness that's constant. Wow. You probably noticed voices saying, oh, you're not supposed to have hopes and fears, or there's no point in hoping for that because it's not going to be like that. So just notice those thoughts coming up, let them go. Just let them be, let them go. Let them be doesn't mean let them stay there. It means don't nurture them, don't feed them, don't give them anything to feed on. And don't sort of, it's a matter of getting the right touch. You don't want them to hang around, but you know that if you actually struggle and resist them, they will hang around. And if you hope that they won't, they will. So it's really a matter of getting the right touch, isn't it? So they come up and you don't give them your attention, but you don't try to block them either. And then after a while, you notice them coming up, but they actually don't derail you. They just come up and they don't derail you. You remain. You can feel that you've got the right balance. So we come back to that shmruti again of recognizing they can come up because they don't derail me. And I don't give them over much attention. And they're actually not a problem. And you notice that more and more as the years go by, how very unproblematic all these negative habits of mind are. So as you're, in a way, stirring up, noticing what's there, starting to decide which bits you want to nurture, which bits you're not going to nurture, what's kind of really positive, and then not getting caught up in, I suppose it's attachment to hopes and fears, isn't it? There's an experiential, emotional, oh, I don't want that to happen. You can almost feel yourself giving it too much reality, relaxing that, but not hoping, not sort of turning around and checking, has it gone? Has it gone? I hope it's gone. Not doing that either. You just, yes, we can sense it for ourselves, can't we? When we've given too much reality to something negative or something positive, even we've become attached to it, or I don't want that to go. On the other hand, we do want happiness, genuine happiness, and we want it to be constant, even when there's negative things there. We want the happiness to be constant, whether there's what we call, roughly speaking, positive and negative, pleasant and unpleasant. We just want to have a constant sense of happiness, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. So you say, well, isn't that a kind of hope? It is in a way, isn't it? It's an aspiration or a sense of direction, a sense of honouring and aligning yourself with something. And then when it becomes a grasping kind of hope of trying to manipulate or control or make something happen, you get to recognise that kind of grasping or attachment or hoping even, that's actually suffering because it's not relaxed. So you can tell the difference by whether it's tense or relaxed. A relaxed hopefulness is full of life, and an attached hopefulness is quite paranoid and tense, sort of fearful of losing something. So then when you notice that, you just let it relax. Reorientate yourself to the heart wish. Wishing for happiness and recognizing that quality. When something's made you laugh, it's amazing, isn't it? What is that? When you laugh, you kind of, it's got a lot of life in it, hasn't it? A lot of life. You smile, you brighten up. It's really worth noticing. What is that? One could have that sense all the time. It could be a constant sense of lightness like that. Very alive, very light. And we do want that for ourselves, don't we? We do want to feel that. That's in the heart of hearts. We long for that. And we'd like others to as well. I can't think of anybody I wouldn't want to be feeling like that. feeling happy and light, and seeing the funny side of life. What is it? Seeing the bright side of life. Yeah. All beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. So what actually causes happiness? Of course, this was the Buddha's great quest. What was suffering? How to overcome suffering? Absolutely, which would mean the opposite of that is not suffering, to be happy. What causes? What gives rise to happiness? And of course, this is where the Buddhist path comes in. By practicing positive karmic actions, the results will be happiness, and negative karmic actions will result in unhappiness. So not only do we want to be happy, we want constant happiness. We want the constant happiness, and what causes constant happiness? Nothing actually causes it. It's negative actions that block it. Positive actions actually are in line with our natural loving nature. So in a way, they're much easier. But because of our negative karmic actions, we've got very negative habits that are very strong. That's why we tend to end up focusing more on the negatives than the positive, because the positives are kind of relatively easy and bring happiness in the present and in the future. So positive actions, in some ways, we could easily sort of take our attention off them. We could take our attention off how much positive there is, because that's taking care of itself. But the problem is the negative, and then we tend to over-focus on the negative. So it's good to remind yourself that actually happiness arises from positive actions, kind, generous, patient, truthful, keeping your word, being reliable, being supportive. And in fact, if you talk about it in terms of mandala principle, it's like reinforcing mandalas that are really aligned with openness, clarity, sensitivity. If you just keep doing actions that reinforce them, your personal mandala, your practice mandala, takes over from all the habitual patterns, which are all these negative mandalas. So you're always stepping into, you're taking refuge, you're giving rise to bodhicitta, you're reinforcing again and again the mandala of awakening, which is the real cause of happiness. Because as long as you're connected to the mandala of awakening, you're tending in the direction of cessation of suffering. But I've noticed that Tara's been going through the Apamanas with a group of people, and I've noticed over the years a lot of people do have difficulty with happiness. And it's worth even just to sit down and do a brainstorm on a word like happiness, and also a word like love or compassion. And when I say a brainstorm, I just mean you're thinking of a word like, well, in the DHB we do it with heart, don't we? And mind. When you think heart, what comes up? What associations? So if you have happiness and you could go for what associations do I have with happiness, you might find, to your surprise, that your association with happiness is being good. Because when you were little, your parents kept saying, be happy, because they wanted you to be happy, and if you weren't happy, you were being naughty, because that wasn't what they wanted. They wanted you to be happy, and you were crying. Be happy. So when you hear be happy, it's sort of like, why should I? You know, it might bring up completely, or it might be something quite superficial. They might just think happiness is just like a passing feeling. I mean, that's not any particular value. So that's those associations, if they're very strongly there, you might need to find another word. Like, may I be, and then think, don't want to say happy. May I be, yes, you might want a completely different word. May I be fulfilled, or may I be satisfied, or feel complete, or feel connected, or feel joyful. Maybe another word would be better. Let's just play around with it, because what's important isn't the word, but something in your experience that you recognize as that's it. That's it. That's the direction I want to go in. You can sense it. Yes, I don't call that happiness. I call it, or maybe you call it love. Who knows? Or when you hear the word love, you might find your associations with love are to do with neediness and demand, and it might be that word has been overused by somebody close to you that has actually made you feel, do you love me? Do you love me? If somebody asks you too much, you really hate the word. How can I tell you if I love you or not? If you can't tell, what's the point in telling you? Sort of, it could really trigger a response that you wouldn't have expected. Again, you can look and think, well, what would I like? I wouldn't. If I don't want to use the word love, what word would I use? And again, it might be something like connected. I want to feel an ease of connection. May I feel ease of connection with all beings, and may I have this feeling of joy and happiness when I think of them being happy. And you can feel in yourself, oh yeah. So when you've played around with it a bit and you've found something that you really want to cultivate, if it's a meditation session, it's good just to not think too much more, but just try to rest, or just try to be with that connection with something that you really value and want. That feeling of, oh, that would be wonderful. Maybe just a few little thoughts, just enough to keep you, bringing you back, and then noticing if you can get something more comes out of that just by staying with it for a bit. So a little bit more comes out of it. So a different angle comes out of it. And then think about how expanded or not that is. I have a sense of it, and I do sort of wish it for myself. Oh, and I do wish it for that person. Oh, and for that. And yes, and for the environment. And then suddenly you're thinking about something and you realize, oh, it's no use thinking for that, because they're in so much pain, they're having so much suffering. It's just too big a problem. It's no use wishing. It's really important to notice that disheartenment, because this is why we're practicing Dharma, because left to our own devices, we close down quite quickly. Like it all becomes hopeless quite quickly. It's really important to notice that, and the practice is for overcoming that sense of hopelessness. But how will we overcome the hopelessness? We'll overcome it by understanding the nature of reality better. When we understand the nature of openness, clarity, sensitivity, the wisdom of not self, wisdom of the real meaning, the real causes of suffering, the wisdom of emptiness, the wisdom of our Buddha qualities, our Buddha nature, then we will realize it makes sense to allow that wish to become totally universal, so that, I mean, even if we think about the suffering of those people around us, it's almost overwhelming. But then when you think of the suffering in the world in general and all the different world disasters that are going on and the threat to the peace of the world and environment and the instability and the wrongness and the wrong-headedness of all these beings, you sort of think, oh, I can't take any more. And that's really important, not to allow that to stay there. It's just a thought. And if you really allow yourself to open out into the absolute bodhicitta that is universal, all-pervading, this is what the Buddha's compassion is, and that's what you're opening into. That's why you're practicing the apamanas. It's really, you really get a sense of where you're going with this meditation and how important this path is. There is no other hope, really. That's the real cause of happiness. So now you're moving into the appamana of mudita, rejoicing in goodness, I suppose you'd have to say. Slightly different male beings have the happiness of complete awakening. Because you sort of are wishing that in the first two in a way, but this one's really focusing on that. But more than anything, it's focusing on the joyfulness of knowing that that is actually possible. So it's a big leap. You have to have a better understanding of what Dharma, the Buddha Dharma is, and that what liberation really means, and therefore what suffering really means. Because if you really understand suffering, you can understand the cause of suffering, and then you have some chance of understanding what liberation from suffering would be, and therefore you have some chance of being able to follow the path, because you'd have the right view. First step on the first Arya Noble Path is right view. And it begins with suffering, so it's good that you notice, oh, I can't actually keep thinking about all the suffering in the world because I get too overwhelmed by it. And you've now actually found the cause of suffering. Because I'm holding on to this view of myself as somebody who cannot hold this view, who can't open to reality. So if you hold on to that view, you're holding on to samsara, you're holding on to rebirth, you're holding on to being a being that's stuck in samsara. So every time you feel, I can't open up anymore, it's a trigger of awareness to really, that's where I'm not actually, it's my working edge, as it were. It seems that I'm actually quite happy and my life's quite contented and I'm enjoying my life, but when I get to that edge, I can feel the resistance. That's the edge I need to be working on, that vaster vision of being able to really allow myself to experience that amount of suffering. Of course, if you go into the vaster vision of Buddhism, really, I was going to say Mahayana Buddhism, but it's Buddhism really, that it's not just the suffering of the human realm. And I often read in books written by Western Buddhists that it's about human suffering. It's not just about human suffering, it's about the suffering of samsara. I mean, humans are actually relatively not suffering. But the beings that are actually further into samsara, more stuck in samsara than we are, the suffering is just unbearable. And even those who've actually made it, if you like, into the God realms, they're all right at the moment, but when their time comes, their fall is terrible. So that vasta vision really helps to prod us out of some sort of complacency that somehow I can feel love and compassion and wish others to be happy to the point that I feel now might be possible. But beyond that, I sort of switch off. But we're talking about dropping that kind of conceptual constraint and allowing ourselves to realize we want more than that. We don't want any limit to it. And therefore, that's what drives us into trying to understand the nature of reality more precisely. What is it I'm not realizing about the nature of reality that makes me think that if I could really take on board the suffering of all beings, I would be so miserable I wouldn't be able to function? So what is making me think that? Again, it's a wrong view. It's a wrong view of what I am. It's a wrong view of the nature of reality. So that really motivates you from compassion. It motivates you to seek that deeper wisdom, which perhaps is called emptiness, or is called Mahamudra, or is called Dzogchen, or called enlightenment, or whatever it is. And although again and again we're told to give up ambition and to give up hopes and fears, it doesn't mean give up that quest. It's kind of an irony there, isn't there? That passionate quest for truth and for realizing the ending of suffering for all beings, the truth that actually would allow that to be a reality. Is that a hope, or is it a fear? Is it ambition? What's wrong with ambition? What's wrong with ambition is when it's based on a false idea of yourself, that I can control things, I can fix things, I can make things better. All that has to be dropped because it's just constraining our true nature. But then if you think, I am taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, I am giving rise to this aspiration to bring all beings to awakening, I will work forever to bring all beings to awakening. I will not abandon any being until all beings are completely brought to awakening. So this sounds like, well, you can't get bigger ambition than that. But it's coming from a different place, isn't it? And again, you have to feel that within yourself. One of those eyes really feels constrained and is like, it feels blocked because it doesn't feel it can do that. And then the other eye has dropped all that, and you've found a source of life within yourself, a source of, Trungpa Rinpoche calls it generosity, endless giving. You've found a source of endless giving that you're committing yourself to. Just, I will always work to bring all beings to awakening until every being is completely delivered from suffering. You can feel it alive in you. And when you let go of the thinking and the words, like you let go into the formless practice, there's something alive there. You don't even know what it is. And then when you think of the Buddha or the Guru or the Buddha Dharma Sangha and you think of their qualities, it reinforces what it is that you found in yourself. It's like, as you look at their qualities, that quality within yourself stabilizes. You can feel it stabilizing, kind of getting a sense of, right, I'm on track. This is the direction. This is how to go forward. So in the meditation session, sometimes you're thinking and finding things that need attention. Sometimes you're just connecting into something that feels alive and real and being able to just keep coming back to that. And sometimes you're just giving it a bit more of a poke into recognizing these as Buddha qualities and opening out to the Buddhas or the Guru or the Bodhisattvas or however you're inspired, and then feeling them being reinforced by that remembrance. Again, it's remembering, isn't it? So you don't want to get too busy with your thinking. You want to leave plenty of space for feeling around and appreciating that positive aspect of the Apamanas. And then, in a way, being able to recognize that this is our own openness, clarity, sensitivity. This is our bodhicitta. This is our heart wish. Just feel it coming more and more alive. And then give it these little pokes into that vaster vision of like what are the qualities of a Buddha and how thinking of those links into what you've found within your own experience, sort of linking them together somehow. And if that's how you're practicing in the sessions, ending up perhaps with recognizing that the formless practice itself is actually resting in, if you like, absolute bodhicitta. That is the formless practice. Heart, wake, heart, open, be, that is bodhicitta. Just be very simple as you can. That is actually resting in absolute bodhicitta for as long as you can. And then between sessions, you dedicate that to the awakening of all beings, and then between sessions, link back into that in whatever ways you find really work for you. And the good thing about the Lojong practices and the Tonglen practices is that you actually train yourself to treat what seems negative and obstructive and obstacles on the path. You actually, as soon as they arise, you've trained yourself to recognize these are opportunities to reconnect to that bodhicitta. So it doesn't really matter what level you do it at. So it might be to start with, you use it because you're experiencing a lot of negativity in your life. You might have difficulties with depression or with anxiety or really difficult home situation or work situation or just generally your health situation. So you've got a lot to work with, and the idea of actually just being able to sit and relax in meditation in this, the spaciousness of awareness, it's a dream. Okay, that would be great. But what I'm really dealing with is a lot of reactivity and a lot of struggle and a lot of worrying and a lot of heaviness and stickiness and darkness. And So your first move is to really acknowledge that, and then learn to notice that you can change. It can change, even if only for briefly. And it might be, and this is an exercise that Trungpa Rinpoche suggests in his Lojong book, it might be just learning to switch. Just learning, so okay, you've got all this negativity and you can heap more on, you can take on that of other people as well. So you've got really about as dark and negative as possible. And then you just for a moment just maybe look up into space, or you just breathe out happiness. I think that might be quite hard to access, but even a little tiny bit of happiness, you kind of, if you like, exaggerate it or act it out. Because it's surprising what we can act. Like we might be feeling really awful, but we could act as if we were happy. Which is amazing, really. So you could sort of think, like really as awful as it can get, and then just act happy. And you know it's part of you saying, but this is false. But you don't need to think that. You could just let that fall away. And then just see how long you could experience that. Because some part of you somewhere experienced that. When you laugh, some part of you somewhere experiences that. So notice that, oh, that switch can happen. And then you could just, well, Trungpa Rinpoche just suggests, breathe in dark, breathe out light, breathe in dark, breathe out light, breathe in dark, breathe out light, without anything, any further elaboration than that, just noticing what the mind can do. It can get completely caught into a mandala that's really dark, and it can just step out into the light. It can go back into the dark, it can step out into the light. It helps to break up and energize that tendency to elaborate whichever state of mind you're in. So if you're in a dark state of mind, it tends to kind of feed into more darkness. Then if you cheer up and you become happy, then it feeds into more almost manic happiness, and then it just collapses into the dark. So this is really, in a way, taking your seat and taking the steering wheel and deciding, noticing that actually it's a faculty you have, it's a faculty you can work with, and then find the right touch for how that is. You can get touch into that, and then that really kind of starts to build up into a positive mandala, and then if you push too hard, it collapses into the negative. Don't give up when it collapses in the negative. You just start where you are and see what's the right touch to keep going to build up that positive mandala. And then when you've got a little bit more confidence, maybe try to take it a bit further when it collapses, not taking that too desperately. Noticing you can still lift it a bit, and then a little bit more, and then kind of down and up and down. However long it takes, that's where Kshanti comes in. Like some of these things take years, some of these things just suddenly go just suddenly go. But whichever it is, there's that underlying confidence that you're connecting into this mandala of your practice. Mandala is linking into the mandala of awakening, and simply by doing those same actions again and again, the mandala is building up. If you don't build it up, there's nothing to return to. There's no structure there to hold you when you come back. But if you're constantly building up this mandala of this tending towards awakening, it becomes a place. I mean, we talk about places as if they're real, but when you analyze any place, you can't find it. And what you end up with realizing is the only real sense of place that is important is the place that you actually can find within your own experience. So if you've built up positive mandala, you can find it in your experience. Because there isn't any other place actually, except the place that is, you could say, our shared experience. It's not, you're not in your own solipsistic little bubble, but we are actually creating our own world all the time. That's the big message of, what is suffering and the causes of suffering, what is happiness and the causes of happiness. We are building our own worlds all the time. So what we do does build our world for us. And that's not within the time frame of this, how we think of time in this life, but the real time of our experience, the real time of what we're going to experience next. We're building a mandala that we can enter that will hold us where we want to be in our experience. That's called, I think that's a good way of thinking of what's meant by accumulating punya. You're creating these positive mandalas, or building a practice mandala that's completely orientated and integral to the mandala of awakening. If you think in those terms, rather than thinking, well, I've done a lot of practice, how have I done? Have I got rid of this? Have I got rid of that? Am I any better than I was? It's not a very good guide, and it's also based on the wrong idea of self and the wrong kind of ambition. So you don't need to think like that. You don't need to keep checking on yourself. As Mukti Shikpa says, you don't have to keep taking your own temperature. You can just have the confidence of knowing you're building a mandala, a practice mandala. It's integrated into the mandala of awakening. You've taken refuge. You're cultivating bodhicitta. That's it. That's your ambition. That's who you are. That's your story of. That's why you get up in the morning. You don't need any other. The rest is details. Depending on all sorts of circumstances. But this remains the same, and it remains the same when you die. Your body goes, this life goes, but you're still in the same mandala, still connected to the mandala of awakening, still building your practice mandala, using the bardo situation to turn everything that seems negative into something positive, taking you further on the path to awakening. That's a win-win situation, isn't it? Gosh, that went quickly. One of the things I was going to talk to you about was love. That we tend to associate love with sensitivity, responsiveness, well-being, that kind of aspect of our being. And sometimes we may feel that we're not feeling love because we don't feel at this particular moment, we don't feel particularly that sense of warmth, particularly, not that we're not feeling warm, but if you're sitting in meditation trying to cultivate love, am I supposed to feel warmer? And how do I get to feel warmer? I don't think that's not particularly what we're looking for, that feeling. Because it feels different in different situations. So you've got the kind of love which is very accommodating. You could say this is the Buddha family type love. It's very spacious, very accommodating. When you encounter it in somebody, you feel very free. You feel loved, but it's not particularly demonstrative. But there's a sense of you can be yourself, that this person isn't trying to manipulate me in any way. They really want the best for me, but it's very free, very open, very equal with different people. It's kind of like it's a wonderful, stable quality to it. You know, you can always trust it. They'll always be there, like space. It's like all pervading. It's always there, and you can really learn to appreciate that kind of love. And your love's like that too. Your love doesn't come and go. And sometimes you might feel more or less warm or happy, or sometimes you're just there. You're just there with your love. You're not going to go anywhere. So that's love too. Not to think I'm not feeling anything. Whereas the Padma kind of love is more connected with a kind of appreciating the qualities of another person. So it's more, perhaps you would say it has more warmth to it. It has the sense of, you can please this person because they really enjoy your company, and there's a lot of life in it. It's got a more fiery, passionate quality to it. We might associate love with that, and sometimes it's like that. But really, that warmth is what is in the all-pervading love, isn't it? It's always there, but not always very expressed or very intense. Whereas perhaps the Padma energy gets more. It's got more qualities to it of appreciating qualities in each other. So these aren't separated. You can't sort of say, well, there's two kinds of love, but sometimes that aspect of love is much more in the foreground than the steady love that's totally reliable and is always there. Sometimes passionate love, it can come and go, can't it, in its distorted form. But it doesn't have to. I mean, you can have passionate love that it isn't coming and going. And then you have the real love that can see the true situation. This is to do with the clarity, isn't it? The Padma one is more like the sensitivity, but the clarity one is the Vajra love that sees the situation so clearly that it's not going to put up with nonsense. It's not going to be put up with, your confusion and your wrong ways of thinking. It's going to come in there and it's going to say, it's going to do something. It's going to say that, that's enough, or something that perhaps you don't want to hear, but it's clear and it's honest and direct. And that kind of love puts you right, doesn't it? And that is love too, even though it doesn't feel very cozy. So again, your love might be expressing itself in that way sometimes. It's no less love than the Buddha love or the Padma love, but sometimes the situation calls for that kind of love. And you find some personalities are more that kind of love. And they can be very direct and very uncomfortable, but at the same time you can't deny the love behind it. Like a mother disciplining her children. Like can clearly see if the child continues that way, it's coming to no good. It has to be stopped. And that's the clarity, the Vajra love. And then you've got your Ratna love, which it's a tremendous generosity in giving. And that's really inspiring, isn't it? Somebody who will just give everything, give time, give energy, give their possessions, their space. It's the love of just giving. I think we can recognize that, can't we? Sometimes that's really just what's needed, and it just creates situations that others can benefit from for, generations to come. That kind of Ratna energy of love. But not, there's other kinds of love. It's not all just like that. There's other kinds of expressions of love. And then the karma love. Of karma is action. This is particularly associated with protective energy, but not solely that. So there's the love that's protective, that defends you, protects you, keeps everything away from you that's going to harm you. And you might not feel that as very cozy. You might not feel that as being very loving, because you're defending a situation or you're being defended. You don't necessarily associate that with love, but it is love. It's a really important aspect of love. It has quite a different character than, like the spacious love or the fierce love of Vajra love or the exciting and wonderful and delightful Padma love. There are different expressions of love, and different personalities tend to express their love according more one way than another, or situations draw out one kind of love more than another. So I think it's important not to have a stereotyped idea of, like what loving should be. It's much more something that you feel from the inside, that is actually, that's what's needed, that's what's called for, that's actually liberating, and that's what I should be tapping into, if you like. Because sometimes we get the idea that loving is always being nice, and actually that can get quite irritating, and maybe why some people don't like the word love, because they feel there's something else is needed. These other qualities of love are what are needed and are important. And that's something that you sense within yourself when you're really in your meditation, I think. When you're really connecting to openness, clarity, sensitivity, mandala principle, you can sense what kind of expression is needed. And as we get more confident, more relaxed, more nearer to simply being, the more accurately we'll be able to express our love in the mandalas that arise in our lives. So I think it's worth thinking about that, and not be careful that we don't have too stereotyped idea about what love is supposed to be, and then trying to cultivate a certain sort of feeling. It's much more alive and dynamic and beyond thought than that. We could actually carry on for a whole year again, couldn't we, talking about the apramanas. Tara was particularly wondering about mudita. I think it's very interesting. She wrote these different things that I've talked about over the years in terms of mudita. How it could be yes, like I have talked about today, how it's really recognizing those good qualities of awakening. And when I say those qualities, it's like you recognize in yourself what are the qualities that are liberating. When it's too much that way or too much that way, it goes into attachment and clinging. But if you get it just right, you can sense that's a liberating quality that leads to awakening, and that awakening is constant. So it's like maybe that third one is like constant love, constant compassion, constant mudita. It's a constant quality that never diminishes, never fails. Whereas the joyfulness and the qualities that actually are impermanent, they come and go, we're letting those fall away, and we're just coming back to that again, using smriti, using our awareness, which we can use in the meditation, and we can use it between sessions. We can keep coming back to that between sessions. What's that constant quality? I can see impermanence, I can see change, I can see causes and conditions. But what's constant? Something about awake, heart, open, be, something constant there that I can keep coming back to. And then in the light of that, everything that's appearing, you could say it was all impermanent and changing and conditioned, or you could just be much more simple than that and recognize it's like a magical illusion. There's nothing there, and yet it's appearing so clearly. This is what Rinpoche is always saying, Khenpo Rinpoche is always saying, how can it appear so clearly when there's nothing there? And that's what we feel with an echo, don't we? When you hear an echo, it sounds just as if a person is there speaking. But you know there isn't a person there speaking, and yet there has to be a voice, there has to be a person there somewhere speaking, but we don't know where. It's like that quality of something's appearing, but we don't even know where, but it's so clear. You can get more and more detailed. Because sometimes when you think, oh, it's like a dream and illusion, you kind of go all fuzzy. But actually, it's like a dream and an illusion, and that's amazing because it gets into more and more detail, and yet it's still not there. So that's one of the ways that you can connect into the absolute bodhicitta in between sessions. The amazing how much can be going on in the space that isn't there. So you don't lose your awareness of everything that's going on, and at the same time you sort of maintain this awareness of it's not being there. In a way, you go around like Khenpo Rinpoche goes around in a state of constant astonishment. Kind of. And then, of course, your love is within that context then, that beings can't see that. Oh, I should tell them, it's all a dream and illusion. Like he's always telling us, it's all a dream and illusion. There is no time, there is no distance. Like it's all sound emptiness, it's all appearance emptiness, it's all bliss emptiness. Kind of keep trying to wake us up to that. That's that love of trying to wake us up. And then there's the love of just what he is now. He's just resting in the clear light nature, and we can link into him, and he's completely there. Kind of sort of up to us, isn't it? Whether we can connect into that or not. And this is what Tara's pointing out, that you can think about Apamanas in the way I've been talking about it, where you're sort of thinking about it. And then you can think about the Apamanas in the context of Tonglen, and in the context of Mandala principle. It's like openness, clarity, sensitivity, and in terms of Mandala principle, that you're building a mandala of the four Apamanas, because they are called the four Brahma Viharas, because Brahma has the total punya, if you like, the maximum mundane samsaric punya that has enabled him to be born as the chief of the gods, but actually a bit more is needed for it to be actually lead to liberation. And that's where the as Buddhists we say not the four Apamanas, but the four Brahma Viharas, we say the four Apamanas, because the element that's missing is the measurelessness of going beyond all concepts and views. So that's why the awakening that will never diminish or fail, because it's not based on views or any kind of conceptual effort, whereas Brahma's is. So it's good, but not so good as it doesn't actually sort of lead to grief in the end. And then another way of practicing them is different ways of practice. Yes, I seem to have been moving around all of this. But certainly there's a way of practicing the apamanas which is actually the same as practicing Guru Yoga. Because you're when you think of the Guru, you think of the Buddha, you think of the mantra of awakening, you think of it as the ultimate expression of the Brahma Viharas. So as you rest in your own Buddha nature, which is openness, clarity, sensitivity, which is the four Brahma Viharas, at the same time you open out to, if you like, to the Buddha's openness, clarity, sensitivity, the Buddha's apamanas, and you realize they pervade you because that's their nature, and they are your nature. So you join, you become one with the Guru through, and that does add an extra quality to the way you meditate on the apamanas. There's that movement towards opening out to other, which I suppose you'd call devotion or veneration or connection. So this Guru Yoga is the ultimate in accumulating punya, really. And then the last one, yeah, I've shifted, haven't I? Maybe that's it. Can you? So what you practice when? It's up to you, really. You've got the rest of your life to practice these, the apamanas. They're not a preliminary practice. They are bodhicitta practice. They are it. So any other practices we do are for enhancing that or taking it further or linking into it more strongly. And as you can see, we do need to link into the view more strongly if we're going to take the apamanas further. We do need to understand emptiness. We do need to develop that insight in our formless meditation. But in the meantime, we have a lot to do. We've a lot to get on with, haven't we? So, and if we only ever got on with practicing the apamanas in this lifetime, we would have spent our time well. There's no doubt. So I hope you're going to be able to come up with lots of questions for me. I'm sure there's lots there. I've touched on many things that could open out and open out. So we have one more Saturday like this, and anyway, I'm continuing with the Lojong teachings on Fridays for anybody who wants to take this further, and I do encourage you to do so. But again, the discovering the heart of Buddhism lays the foundation, and the apamanas, Tonglen practices kind of are ways of relating to those same teachings from maybe more spelt out way. And of course, the trusting the heart of Buddhism does help you to link into the vaster vision behind these teachings, give you a sense of where they're coming from, because sometimes they just refer to things in passing that you're not quite sure you've ever experienced. You're not really. So hopefully, discovering the heart of Buddhism and trusting the heart of Buddhism will help you to connect it all to your experience more directly. And of course, the meditation instruction, and yeah, plenty to get on with, both in your meditation and in your everyday life practice. Look at that. We dedicate this punya to the enlightenment of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings realize complete and perfect awakening. May the heart's awareness awaken in the unawakened. Where it has begun to stir, may it never fade, and may it awaken fully. Chanchu Samni Rinpoche, Macha Panam Jejejik, Jeba Nyamba Mapadang, Kone Kondu Pelwasho. Chanchu Samni Rinpoche, Macha Panam Jejejik, Jeba Nyamba Mapadang, Kone Kondu Pelwasho. Chanchu Samni Rinpoche, Macha Panam Jejejik, Jeba Nyamba Mapadang, Kone Kondu Pelwasho.